Hey, everybody. We have made it. It is Friday, May 24th, 2024, 5/24/24, as we head into a Memorial Day weekend here. You're listening to the Mo.news podcast. I'm Mosheh.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. Jill, did that feel a little bit like Robin Williams' Good Morning Vietnam? I'm trying to bring some energy here.
I was just getting flashbacks to the beginning of this year because I feel like you were so into the numbers of like 23, 24. And I felt
1,
like
4, 2, 4.
Yes. But you kind of let that go now that we're in May.
Listen, I try to change things up every morning so you guys know, we're doing this fresh on a daily basis. Though, a bit of housekeeping. We're taking the 3-day weekend, like many of you. So no podcast on Monday. We'll be back here on Tuesday.
That's right, but we will have a special edition of the newsletter on Monday.
Yes, as we look ahead to Memorial Day, which, fun fact, Memorial Day initially was started to remember all the soldiers who were lost in the Civil War, and then after World War I, it became a day to remember all of the soldiers we have lost through all the wars here in American history. And so for the newsletter on Monday, we'll be bringing back one of the conversations we had. We'll be bringing back one of the conversations we had with a veteran in the aftermath of the Afghan withdrawal. Ben Sledge has a book out. He talks about the struggles. He talks about the struggles of his fellow veterans coming back from war. So I think you'll find that to be a very meaningful read as we think about both the troops that we've lost and all of the brave soldiers, Marines, airmen, and everyone else who has served this country.
All right, time for the headlines. Memorial Day travel, expect delays, and Mosh.
Wait, don't say it, Jill.
I can't not. Pack your patience, people.
Pack it in your carry-on or check it.
Why this year could actually be worse than others. Plus, NOAA is warning of the worst hurricane season in years. And could it soon be cheaper to get a ticket to see Taylor Swift? I doubt it, but the Justice Department is suing to break up Live Nation and Ticketmaster and says that the price of concert tickets could go down because of it.
But pack your patience for this one, too, because it might be a while before you see any changes.
Meanwhile, overseas, China is holding military drills around Taiwan. Is it a sign of things to come? Saudi Arabia makes history with its first ever swimsuit show.
Yeah, we'll talk about some of the changing looks in Saudi Arabia.
Iran's President Raisi has been laid to rest, and Mosheh answers a common question from the Instagram account. Mosheh, why isn't the U.S. just assassinating all of the country's enemies who were there? That is a question that you've gotten numerous times, actually.
Apparently, people are still trigger happy. We'll break it down for you.
An expanding public health concern, 1 in 9 kids in America has an ADHD diagnosis. And candy, not just fun and games. There is a new lawsuit accusing Hersheys of using deceptive packaging on Reese's products.
Yeah, this is a different lawsuit from the one we told you about earlier this year. We'll break it down.
Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating. Okay, let's start with the big story this weekend, holiday travel. And Mosh, we do have to start this the only way that we know how, by warning everyone who is planning to travel this weekend, particularly by air, to pack their patience. Now, if you are new to this podcast, you should know that is our least favorite cliched TV expression.
And we appreciate all of you who message me with clips from your local stations or national TV, being like, oh my God, Mosh, they said it again, because you guys are all now alert to the cliche, pack your patience. I believe they used it on the Today Show this week, Jill, so I got several people sending me a note about it.
Oh my God. The Today Show is like ground zero for
They
pack
might
your
have
patience.
invented the phrase pack your patience.
Needless to say, this is expected to be the busiest Memorial Day travel weekend perhaps ever. According to AAA, nearly 44 million people are expected to travel 50 miles or more from home over the weekend. That is up 4% from last year, and it's close to matching the record from 2005. The TSA administration saying up to 3 million people might pass through airport checkpoints today alone. Most of the major airlines in the U.S. are saying it's going to be the busiest Memorial Day travel in their history, and it's just a preview of what's to expect for the rest of the summer. Airline trade groups estimate that about 271 million travelers will fly between June 1st and August 31st, which is more than last year's record of 255 million. But the airlines say they are ready for the crowds, and it is despite air traffic control shortages. There is actually, according to ABC News, about 3,000 fewer air traffic controllers than the FAA would like. They are working as quickly as possible to get more air traffic controllers trained, but it takes years. It actually takes about 4 years to get through all of the training. In terms of flight delays, airlines have been taking preventative measures. They've actually cut flights in the New York City area by about 10% because, as you know, delays in one area can have a ripple effect throughout the entire system. Okay, Mosh, any guesses where people are going? According to AAA, the top domestic and international destinations are familiar ones. Any guesses?
So specific, or should I just say, is everyone going to grandma's house?
No, I've got 2 cities in the United States and 3 cities abroad.
Okay. So I will always go with Orlando for Disney World. Is that one of them?
Ding, ding, ding.
Okay. And is the other one, like, I don't know. I have a very New York-centric view. New York?
No, it is Las Vegas.
Okay. Vegas, Orlando. That makes sense. International now. Most visited city in the world, Paris, obviously, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So Paris is 1. London 2?
Correct.
Okay. I'm debating number 3 between Madrid and Rome. Let's go with the Pope. Let's go with the Pope. Rome?
Mosh! Oh my gosh, playing this is not even fun with you because you're too good. Yes. So it's London, Paris, and Rome for the international destinations, and Orlando and Vegas for the US ones.
So I got 4 out of 5. I'm pretty proud of myself for that. And I will not get it wrong next year because guess what? People are pretty consistent in their in their travel. So what's interesting about this, Jill, is we've talked about the economy and how Americans say they are concerned with the economy, yet still spending on travel, spending on experiences. Still, you could say that is left over from the pandemic and people still want to get out and about, despite the added costs, despite having to pack their patients in several pieces of luggage. The good news right now, when it comes to prices, and this may explain why more people are out there, airfares are down 6%. Hotel rates are down just under 1% compared with a year ago. So that's good news. And it comes as prices for renting a car or truck are down 10%. As far as how people are getting around, well, vast majority of you will be doing so via car. 38 million Americans expected to travel by car. That's 1 out of 10. Gas prices right now, about the same as last year, about $3.60 a gallon on average. I know those of you in California and some other states pay much more than that. Some of you in the South pay less than that. So $3.60 is the average right now. And when it comes to hitting the road, here are the best times based on various analyses out there. This one from the transportation data firm INRIX. The best times, some of them were yesterday, Thursday, before 11 a.m. or after 7 p.m. As far as this morning, depending on how early you're listening to us, if you get out before 11 a.m., good idea. If not, wait until after 7 p.m. tonight to get on the road. Saturday evening, also ideal if you're going to just spend a shorter weekend away. As far as your return home, the recommendation is leave before 1 on Sunday. If not, wait until Monday evening after 7 p.m. to hit the road.
The Saturday evening, it's like, what is the point? Where have you gone?
You're getting all day Sunday and part of the day Monday. Jill, I feel like those are for people who have specific feelings about their family.
Fair. Very good point.
Or kids with a bunch of sporting events on a Saturday morning.
Okay, something that's looking like it will definitely impact summer travel in general, hurricane season. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, commonly known as NOAA, released its 2024 forecast for the Atlantic hurricane season. And let's just say it is not good. The agency is warning that the U.S. could face one of its worst hurricane seasons in 2 decades with its most aggressive outlook ever. Meteorologists with the government are predicting 17 to 25 tropical storms. They say 8 to 13 of them are likely to become hurricanes, including 4 to 7 major hurricanes. That means Category 3 or above. The hurricane season officially starts June 1st. It ends on November 30th. but most activity occurs between mid-August and mid-October. The average season has 14 named storms, 7 hurricanes, and 3 major hurricanes.
So when you look at this projection, you're at nearly double the named storms, potentially double the hurricanes, double the major ones. Jill, we saw the same thing. Colorado State University does a hurricane assessment and prediction as well, and they were getting some of these same numbers. So now you have a consensus here between the 2 major estimates we look at, NOAA and Colorado State University. A couple things to blame here as far as why we're going to be seeing potentially an above average season, an extreme season, they predict. There is the record warm ocean temperatures right now in the Atlantic. Right now, we're in the transition from El Nino to La Nina. That typically means warmer than average ocean temps. And that also means reduced trade winds, less wind shear, effectively all the ingredients, unfortunately, to make for powerful hurricanes. And then, of course, you have climate change, which is increasing temps as well. They're comparing this year to 2005. That was a year where we got 28 named storms, Jill. Also 2005, you might remember that. It was the year that brought us Hurricane Katrina.
Oh, I remember. I was working at NBC at the time on their national desk and just watching the raw, unedited videos coming in, and it was wild.
So I remember I was in D.C. and I had a friend who worked for the Homeland Security Council over the White House. And they were monitoring things because they were very concerned about it. And they thought they were breathing a sigh of relief after it made landfall. Because if you remember, they initially got through it. The levees break several hours later. So I actually happened to be at a bar with somebody who was like, okay, we got through it. Who we were watching cable news at the bar, and he's like, oh my God, I got to go back to the White House. The levee has broken. So it was a secondary event there when it comes to Katrina. That said, so you saw in 2005, 28 named storms. They're very concerned this year. Again, this is just a projection we're getting right now from NOAA. But one of the concerns, Jill, when we talk about ocean temps, just to give you a sense of how warm things are, right now the temperature in certain parts of the Atlantic in May is at August temperatures. That's usually peak temperatures, and we're already there 3 months early. Warm water is fuel for storms because the heat provides energy for the winds, and warmer water provides more moisture. More moisture leading to larger, more powerful storms. You've also seen in recent years, climate change has led to storms basically escalating in strength as they approach landfall at 3 times the speed that we saw in previous decades. We've been seeing some of the most destructive hurricanes in recent years. Of course, there's Hurricane Ian that hit Florida, killed 150, caused $110 billion in damage. In 2021, there's Hurricane Ida. That killed 100 people, caused $75 billion in damage between Louisiana all the way up to New England. So 4 of the last 5 years have had an above average number of storms. So beware here, take your precautions, get ready. And the most important thing is when they call for evacuations, if you can get out of Dodge, please do. Because what we've seen in recent years, Jill, is even when they think, okay, it'll just be a Category 1 and it looks like the cone is headed this way, we've seen as these storms have been approaching land in recent years, these deviations and this massive strengthening in the last few hours.
That's right. And you're also putting first responders at risk. So even if you yourself feel like you're going to get through it and you're not concerned, it's not just about you.
Yeah, don't be like, oh, I'll just hang out on the attic or on the rooftop and wait for the choppers.
Okay, time for the speed read. Mosheh, I know we've talked about how fun has gotten so expensive, from concert tickets to professional sports tickets. Well, perhaps things could be changing. This is a story from the Wall Street Journal. The Justice Department and more than 24 states sued Live Nation on Thursday, alleging that the entertainment giant has a monopoly in ticketing and concert promotion and should be broken up. That lawsuit was filed in a New York federal court. So the argument here is that Live Nation uses its power to squelch competition and retaliate against promoters and venues that threaten its dominance. The Justice Department says the company chokes off competition in key pieces of the concert system, driving prices and fees a lot higher for fans. Ticketmaster is a subsidiary of Live Nation. I want to play a bit from Attorney General Merrick Garland's press conference earlier, in which he announced that the Justice Department is suing Ticketmaster and its owner, Live Nation. Take a listen.
In recent years, Live Nation Ticketmaster's exorbitant fees and technological failures have been criticized by fans and artists alike. But we are not here today because Live Nation Ticketmaster's conduct is inconvenient or frustrating. We are here because, as we allege, that conduct is anti-competitive and illegal. Our complaint makes clear what happens when a monopolist dedicates its resources to entrenching its monopoly power and insulating itself from competition rather than investing in better products and services. We allege that Live Nation has illegally monopolized markets across the live concert industry in the United States for far too long. It is time to break it up.
And the big question, Moshe, is what will happen if the government actually wins here?
Right. What sort of new rules will the judge enforce? Will they demand that these companies split up? Officials say U.S. consumers could in the future, they're hoping, if they win this case, pay lower prices because a broader range of companies could offer tickets to shows. The added competition. The view is that added competition will drive down extra fees that Ticketmaster has tacked on. You may have seen some of the memes, Ticketmaster adding the you're still not going to buy tickets fee, or the, we're just adding this fee as you go through the ticket buying process. The view is that added competition could drive down all those extra fees you see as you're going through the process, because the view from the Ticketmasters of the world is you're going to buy these tickets anyway, so why not add all these extra fees? Now, Ticketmaster says that those fees are necessary. One would argue, including the government, that they're probably not. The government says Live Nation prevents rival promoters from booking the venues that it owns and operates, which constrains supply, putting more pressure on prices. Effectively, they own the full spectrum, the full solar system of live music, and that is what has led to these skyrocketing prices. Live Nation owns or operates 370 venues or festival sites globally, allowing it to route tours to its own buildings. Now, the company said on Thursday it does not have a monopoly. It'll fight the government's case. Ticketmaster says it doesn't set the prices. Artists and teams do, and they are subject to high demand, low supply, while the majority of fees go to the venues. Ticketmaster saying the government will lose in court because it ignores the basic economics of live entertainment, such as the fact that the bulk of service fees go to the venues. So they're saying they're actually not making that much profit off of all of this, Jill, and they believe they will win this case. Remember, it was the U.S. government who allowed these two to merge back in 2010. They got together. Now it appears the government has regrets over all of this. Right now, 70% of tickets for major concert venues in the U.S. are sold through Ticketmaster. And so we will watch this case, Jill, and given most federal cases, we're going to be watching this into 2025, maybe 2026. There will be appeals. So eventually we'll get some sort of resolution. It's unclear when.
When you look at Taylor Swift's power here, it is actually when her concert series went on sale, and it was such an absolute debacle, that the federal government really started to take notice, at least lawmakers really started to take notice of just how impractical the system is to try and get tickets to a concert. So thank you, Taylor Swift, I guess.
Taylor Swift, what was she writing about Ticketmaster Live Nation when she said that I knew you were trouble when you walked in?
Are you ready for it? I mean, you could use her lyrics for so many different things.
Yes. Right after the Today Show tells you to pack your patience, they'll have a Taylor Swift lyric pun for you as they get into this story this morning.
Taylor Swift shaking it off. Okay, from the BBC, China has started 2 days of military exercises around Taiwan, with its military calling them strong punishment for the self-ruled island's separatist acts. The drills come 3 days after the inauguration of President William Lai, who called on China to stop threatening the island and accept the existence of its democracy. In his inauguration address last Monday, Mr. Lai called on China to stop threatening Taiwan. Beijing has previously labeled Lai as a separatist and troublemaker over remarks that he had made in the past supporting Taiwanese independence. China sees Taiwan as a breakaway province that will eventually be under Beijing's control. The island sees itself as distinct. Taiwanese military experts say that Thursday's drills, for the first time, simulated a full-scale attack, not just an economic blockade.
So by conducting these patrols, as you noted, Jill, this is China saying, we're punishing you, Taiwan, for saying that you have any sort of sovereignty. even though you've been effectively independent for more than 70 years now, they are trying to show Taiwan that, we're eventually going to take you over again. They want to show the Americans that any effort to resupply or reinforce Taiwan from the east is vulnerable to Chinese missile strikes and naval attack. Keep in mind, Taiwan is located just to the east of China. And what China is doing by encircling Taiwan is showing that one day, if they invade Taiwan, that Americans will not have access to help Taiwan, because they are showing through these drills that they can completely surround the island, that they're not just coming from the west anymore. And so this is a drill. It appears to only be a drill here, but it comes as the Chinese have conducted multiple incursions into Taiwanese water and airspace in recent years. They actually carried out their first encirclement operation back in 2022. That's when, if you remember, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi visited the island to reinforce to Taiwan that they have U.S. support. The Chinese insist that Taiwan is, quote, an inalienable part of China's territory. This will not change in the future. Taiwan independence is doomed to fail. But while at the same time things are complicated, like most things in the world, China and Taiwan do remain trading partners. Despite all of this, the economies are connected between the two countries. One of the things we're watching, Jill, is whether it's just a matter of time here as Xi Jinping, who has consolidated power around himself, is sticking around longer than previous Chinese premiers, has talked about reunification happening in the coming years. And so these Chinese military maneuvers are being watched very closely. And the big question, of course, is what would the U.S. do in that case? Have the Chinese learned lessons from Putin's invasion of Ukraine? Do they see the situation in the Middle East as a distraction for the world for them to do this? There's been a lot of talk that the latter half of this decade, the late 2020s, if China was to try to invade Taiwan and take it over, it would happen then based on the weaponry that the two countries currently have. So it's something that a lot of people are watching very closely.
Now to the latest in Iran. From the Associated Press, Iran interred President Ibrahim Raisi at the nation's holiest Shiite shrine on Thursday, days after he was killed in a helicopter crash. All of this adding to the troubles of a country already dealing with international sanctions, internal unrest, and tensions abroad. Notably, the days of services for Raisi have not drawn the same crowds in this country of over 80 million people as the 2020 gatherings for Revolutionary Guard General Qassem Soleimani. He was killed, if you remember, by a U.S. drone strike in Baghdad. It is a potential sign of the public's feelings about Raisi's presidency, which included a harsh government crackdown on dissent during the protests over the 2022 death of Mahsa Amini. She was detained for allegedly not wearing her mandatory headscarf to authorities' liking. That crackdown, as well as Iran's struggling economy, have gone unmentioned in the hours of coverage provided by state TV and in newspapers. Never discussed either was Raisi's involvement in the mass execution of an estimated 5,000 dissidents at the end of the Iran-Iraq war.
Shocker, Jill, as a close watcher of Iranian state media.
And still there is little information about the cause of the crash and the aging Bell helicopter that went down in a foggy, mountainous region. The country's security forces are supposed to be investigating in the coming days. But Moshe, I did notice that you posted on Instagram photos from Raisi's funeral, which included a who's who of America's enemies. We're talking senior leaders of the Taliban, Houthi leaders, Hezbollah's number 2 person, the leader of Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh. At least he is the political leader who lives in Qatar. And I noticed that a bunch of people asked you why the U.S. or Israel, quote, isn't taking them out. And it sounds like a lot of people are thinking this. So I just figured we should discuss it.
Yeah, it was certainly a vibrant debate happening on the Instagram feed yesterday because they're like, listen, this is an open air funeral, and literally some of the people who are wreaking the most havoc, killing Americans, threatening Americans, are all gathered there, right? You got Hezbollah, you got the Houthis, you got Hamas, you got the Taliban, you got a bunch of senior military leaders from Iran. The bottom line is, folks, we're not going to launch missiles at a state funeral in Iran unless you want to lead to a larger regional all-out holy war. Despite the issues you may have with these individuals, there are ways to conduct business. And I think, if anything, the U.S. has learned that assassinating leaders over the course of the past, 100 years hasn't always achieved aims. In fact, usually it's done the opposite. And I use that opportunity and that question to dive a bit into the history of U.S. involvement, both launching coups and assassinating world leaders through the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. Some people didn't know this, but that used to be sort of CIA MO back then at the height of the Cold War. Any world leader that we felt was going too close to the Soviets, the CIA would launch operations either to launch a coup in their country or in some cases assassinate those leaders. It actually led to the fact, it led to congressional hearings. It actually led to congressional hearings in the 1970s and led to President Gerald Ford signing an executive order saying no employee of the U.S. government shall engage in or conspire in political assassination. Basically, they looked at the track record and they're like, this didn't work out very well for us around the world, in Africa, in South America, Central America, and by the way, in Iran. A bit of history here. In 1953, they had a democratically elected leader who they very much liked, named Mohammad Mossadegh. He decided to make a move to nationalize the oil industry there. Who was upset about that? The British, because the British until then controlled energy assets in Iran. The British call the Americans, they're like, hey, what do we do about this leader? The Americans are like, what do you want to do about it? The British are like, by the way, he's getting really close to the Soviet Union. He might be a commie. Americans were like, oh, really? Then let's do something. So who do they put in charge of it? Kermit Roosevelt. Who is Kermit Roosevelt? The grandson of Teddy Roosevelt.
Just when we thought we knew all of the Roosevelts, they throw in a Kermit.
They actually, Kermit was a family name. There were multiple Kermits in the Roosevelt family. Teddy has a grandson named Kermit. Kermit's a CIA operative. He gets put in charge of taking out Mossadegh in Iran. They launched not one, but two coups on Mossadegh because he finds out about the first one. Eventually, they're successful. They help reinforce the Shah of Iran, who is a U.S. ally. What happens 25 years later? The Shah of Iran goes down in a revolution by people who were very much upset with many of his actions, including conspiring with the U.S. to take out Mossadegh. So my point is, you look at what's going on in Iran today, and you can trace it back to the U.S. coup, the U.S.-sponsored coup back in 1953, 70 years ago, that interfering with world leaders and other governments sometimes, well, in recent American history, most of the time, backfires against you. I also brought up the example of Iraq. We had issues with Saddam Hussein. Well, Saddam's gone, and what have we got in the past 20 years? Constant war, ISIS, Iran, basically taking over the entire region. And so you look around, and so for those of you who are like, let's just, the trigger happy among you, why don't we take out these leaders and this leader, is we've discovered that taking out certain individuals isn't necessarily a pathway to peace and stability.
From Newsweek, Saudi Arabia hosted its first swimsuit fashion show, a notable cultural shift in a country where women were required to wear body-covering abaya robes just a few years ago. The poolside event took place on the second day of the inaugural Red Sea Fashion Week on Friday. A Moroccan brand displayed designs by the poolside of the St. Regis Hotel in the Umahat Islands. It featured the work of a Moroccan designer and included mostly one-piece bathing suits in shades of red, beige, and blue. Most models had exposed shoulders, and some had their midriffs partially visible.
Pretty remarkable, given the Saudi Arabia that most of us became accustomed to for a number of years. This inaugural Fashion Week is one of the mega projects that is part of what Saudi Arabia calls Vision 2030, overseen by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. While his father's officially king, his father's very sick, and so Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, has effectively been running the country for the better part of 7 or 8 years now. He has spearheaded a number of initiatives, including allowing women to drive, sidelining the religious police in the country. They used to walk around with sticks, beating women who weren't covered up enough. They've also reintroduced movie theaters for the first time in decades. And they've also allowed music festivals where women and men are allowed to attend at the same time, which is all very revolutionary in Saudi Arabia, given the Wahhabists, the very extremist religious ideology that really led the country for a number of years. So MBS is really pushing this idea that he's a reformer. At the same time, we should remind you, he's very much still an autocratic leader. These reforms come as they've really ramped up repression on any dissent, any criticism. If you're a human rights activist or even a women's rights activist who's asking for more, you might be in prison right now serving a long sentence. And of course, there was the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi a few years ago that U.S. intelligence believes was spearheaded, was led by MBS.
It is fascinating to see the difference between what's happening in Iran and what's happening in Saudi Arabia. And 50 years ago, if you were going to ask which of these two countries was going to be having a swimsuit fashion show, I don't think you would have said Saudi Arabia.
No, and if you look at pictures of Iran before 1979, women, were dressed in modern Western attire. And of course, now they have the religious stick-wielding police walking the streets of Tehran.
From NBC News, a new report out from the CDC says that about 1 in 9 children in the U.S. between the ages of 3 and 17 have been diagnosed with ADHD, the CDC calling attention deficit hyperactivity disorder an expanding public health concern. Researchers found that in 2022, 7.1 million kids and adolescents in the U.S. had received an ADHD diagnosis. That's 1 million more children than a decade ago. The study's lead author says that the jump in diagnoses was not surprising, given that the data was collected during the pandemic. And she notes that other studies have found that many children experienced heightened stress, depression, and anxiety during the pandemic.
Yeah, the increase in diagnoses also comes amid a growing awareness of ADHD and the different ways it can manifest in children. Part of the attribution here is that it was always seen as something that afflicts boys much more than girls. But what we've learned in recent years is that it manifests differently in girls versus boys. So you're seeing more diagnoses in girls. And some of the experts say it was always there. They're just now realizing it as the reporting ramps up here. Now, the report also found that while the number of kids diagnosed with ADHD has risen over the course of the past 10 years, only about half of them are taking medications to treat the condition, compared to 2/3 back in 2016. So a lower percentage, despite being diagnosed with ADHD, are taking any medication for it. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, we've been telling you about the shortage. And those of you who are close to this have experienced this, and many of you have written in about the shortage of ADD drugs, ADHD drugs, calling around to various pharmacies. Part of that has to do with the DEA and how they are making rules about those types of drugs. Part has to do with how we're getting those drugs into the country and some of the production happening abroad. At the same time, you also have some parents who are reluctant to put their kids on drugs amid concerns that those drugs could become addictive over time. Now, the CDC says here they don't see that, and they say that it is, and they do say that it is important to treat ADHD. The report also found that about 80% of the children diagnosed with ADHD have at least one other diagnosed disorder, typically something behavioral or conduct problems, anxiety, developmental delays, autism, and depression are also observed among kids, some kids who have ADHD as well. Kids with ADHD are at increased risk for things like depression, anxiety, and substance abuse if left untreated.
And finally, from NPR, Mosh, several individuals in Florida are very upset about the packaging that Reese's is using on some of their candy bars lately. And they've actually gone as far as filing a federal lawsuit against the Hershey company, alleging that designs displayed on some Reese's peanut butter cups were misleading to customers.
Oh, to have such time, Jill, to file lawsuits against the Hershey company.
In a 20-page lawsuit, 4 consumers argue that the chocolate manufacturer misled its customers with several of its Reese's peanut butter products by showing explicit, carved-out artistic designs on the wrappers. Once the chocolate candies are unwrapped from their packaging, the actual products and the products are, quote, blanks, according to
It's just chocolate. It's just chocolate without the design on the cover.
The suit reads, Hershey's deceptive advertising is causing many consumers to purchase the products because of the cool and beautiful carved out designs on the product's packaging when they would not have purchased the product if they were truthfully advertised.
I buy my chocolate based on the design, Jill.
The chocolate candies listed by the consumers in the lawsuit include Reese's Metal, Reese's Peanut Butter Pumpkin, Reese's White Ghost, Reese's Peanut Butter Bats, and Reese's Peanut Butter Footballs. In one of the pictures, I saw that Reese's looked like a guitar,
Yeah.
And then I guess you open it and it's just a regular circle.
Yeah.
But like, where's the harm besides the few dollars that you spent in buying the Reese's? And I guess the emotional disappointment.
Yes. I really wanted that carved out guitar, and it was just a piece of chocolate sort of shaped like a guitar. Well, we'll see what a judge has to say about this. The 4 consumers are asking for an unspecified amount of compensatory damages. Jill, they need to be compensated for their pain and suffering when they opened the chocolate and were disappointed. The NPR spoke to an attorney representing the plaintiffs. His firm, he says, receives dozens of calls a month for cases involving misleading advertising. He says he doesn't take majority of them, but he did decide to take this case. His firm is also representing a group of plaintiffs who are suing Burger King. In that case, again, represented by the same firm, they're saying that the food chain is misleading, that the food chain uses misleading advertising to present its food items as larger than they are. So you see the big burger. So you see that big burger that Burger King puts in its ads, and then you show up at Burger King and it's much smaller. So those people are suing as well. Jill, we told you earlier this year on the podcast, there's another Florida woman who has filed a lawsuit against Reese's here because of the peanut butter pumpkins jack-o'-lantern wrapping. On the wrapping, there was a jack-o'-lantern. When she opened it up, no jack-o'-lantern. The design is just not there, Jill. The design is not there on the chocolate, like on the wrapping. In her case, her name is Cynthia Kelly. She's asking for $5 million in compensation for the pain and suffering Reese's has caused her. It is unclear if and when that case will go before a judge. Jill, we talk about the grocery store often. Is there any food lately that has been disappointing you when you open up the packaging? Because listen, let's file a Mo.news lawsuit. I want to make sure that you're being compensated for the pain the grocery store is causing you lately.
I do get frustrated about shrinkflation, as we've talked about.
That makes sense.
Where you open up a bag of potato chips and it's like half full, and you're like, did somebody eat half of this already?
That's a lawsuit I can get behind. I can get behind that lawsuit.
Okay, good to know, Mosh. Maybe we'll go in on it together.
Class action. Let me know. Let me know who is not giving you enough potato chips in the bag.
All right, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Mosh, what are you watching?
So, Jill, there's a new Beach Boys documentary over on Disney Plus that went up in the last day. Have always been a big Beach Boys fan. Pet Sounds, one of the most iconic, best albums in history. So, looking forward to learning more. And then there is the Netflix documentary about free diving, The Deepest Breath. I found that documentary fascinating, and it is the subject of a brand new Mo.news interview pod. We put up that conversation initially on Premium earlier in the week. It's a conversation with Will Trubridge. He is the world record holder when it comes to holding his breath underwater and these free dives, and is a fascinating conversation. If you're looking for something interesting for your travels this weekend as you pack your patience, pack the Mo.news interview pod. We got a lot of conversations for you, including this one with Will Trubridge on free diving. It's a fascinating sport, and what he goes through psychologically, physically, as he describes it, I think you'll find fascinating. Jill, what are you watching?
I'm going to be watching the new Kevin Spacey documentary. It's streaming on Max. It's called Spacey Unmasked. It's a 2-part series that features previously unheard testimonies about Spacey's alleged sexually inappropriate behavior. And it comes about 10 months after he was found not guilty of sexual assault allegations brought by 4 men in the UK. So it should be interesting. Yeah, especially I think a few of the cases here have fallen through, as in he's won, I think, all the cases that he's faced so far for a variety of reasons. So I think I'll check that out as well. Mosh, what are you reading? So, Jill, we often talk about the Americans who are held abroad, right, in countries like North Korea, Russia, especially. Well, there's a new book out from one of the chief negotiators who talks about his experience negotiating with dictators in North Korea, in Russia, in Iran. His name is Mickey Bergman. He's actually going to be a guest on an upcoming Mo.news interview pod. His book is called In the Shadows, The True Stories of High-Stakes Negotiations to Free Americans Captured Abroad. When you look at the back, one of the people who wrote a quote about the book is Brittany Griner, actually. She says, Mickey and Governor Bill Richardson, who just recently passed, are a big part of why I am home. And so anyway, find this very fascinating because you never hear this side of the story, which is how do these negotiations go down? So looking forward to reading this. And Moshe, when you talk to him, you should definitely ask him about Evan Gershkovich and what's going on with him and what kind of negotiations he thinks are happening right now.
Yeah, unfortunately, no shortage of Americans right now being held in a number of countries, in particular Russia. Jill, what are you reading?
I'm going to be reading this article in The Atlantic. Why are people weird about only children? And it's a really interesting question. As the article asks, onlys, as they call them, don't seem to be any worse off than kids with siblings. So why do stereotypes about them persist? And I think it is fascinating in light of the fact, as we're talking about in the newsletter today, in the light of fertility rates that are really declining, why is there, and is there still a stigma about only children? I don't think there is really as much of a stigma anymore as there used to be.
Yeah.
But I guess maybe there is.
Well, I mean, there's always assumptions, only children can't share well, they don't socialize well. I feel like there's only children and middle children. There's the stereotypes about both of them. So, Jill, let me know what we find out via The Atlantic.
Okay, what are we eating this weekend?
I mean, Jill, there's an obvious answer to that, which is for many of us, it's barbecue. And one of the reasons I say that is, one, I'll have some barbecue, but also there's some fun stats related to hot dog eating this weekend. So it is estimated, based on the numbers, that on Memorial Day, 800 hot dogs are eaten every second in America. That means 72 million hot dogs, an estimated 72 million hot dogs will be eaten on Memorial Day, on Monday alone. So hot dog eating season begins. So just think about it. If you're eating a hot dog, or if you're just existing this weekend, 800 hot dogs every second. Jill, what's on the menu for you this weekend?
Well, I'm also going with a Memorial Day kind of idea.
Yes.
At some point this weekend, I'm going to the Sunset Club at Tappan Beach. It is a restaurant right on the beach, right on the water here on Long Island. And I believe that I will be getting a lobster roll. I've looked at their menu. I think a lobster roll, or it's between a lobster roll or a fish taco.
Jill, that's a lot of advanced planning for a meal that's still a couple days away.
Well, Moshe, we're recording the podcast now, so I need to come up with something, and that is what I'm eating.
Hey, listen, credit. You didn't crowdsource it. This is...
Exactly. I didn't ask the audience.
No.
These are real. This is real. This is what I'll be eating.
We'll see you at Tappan Beach. I'll be there all weekend.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a wonderful, long holiday weekend.
See you guys. Stay safe out there.